Hi everyone, open session, so no insider secrets in this one. This is how to burn out at work. This presentation is going to be full of awful advice, and I'm kind of amazed how many people want to hear this terrible advice, but thank you so much for coming. One tiny thing I really wanted to add here was I went to a presentation yesterday that had all their references laid out. The first image I put in my presentation, I didn't reference this guy on the bike. He's a stunt rider called Rock Bagaros, and I've totally mispronounced his name, but that's that bit done. My name's Emily. I'm a lead level designer at Sumo Newcastle. These are my dogs, Bob and Gus. It's the most popular bit of it every time. First things first, what is burnout? So burnout, this is a state of physical and emotional exhaustion, and it is brought on by long-term stress in your job. So if you're approaching burnout, and this is occupational burnout, you may be feeling tired or drained, cynical, overwhelmed, and experiencing self-doubt. And this can manifest in a whole bunch of different ways. So you may be unable to concentrate, experiencing headaches, becoming sick more often, and having issues sleeping as well. So the most important thing here is if you are experiencing occupational burnout, you must get signed off from work. There's no other way around that. And I want to qualify, it does not need to get that extreme to make it worth stopping, talking, and doing something about it. And that is why I'm doing this talk. So while I was putting this together, coming into the office in Newcastle, so many people came up to me and shared with me their stories about burnout. So I've got a bunch of different experiences from a few different people. So we'll just go straight into these, and I'll reveal who these are later. So person one, I had a simple form to fill in and realized I couldn't even write down my own name. Person two, panic attacks caused me to wake up in the middle of the night. I had to walk around my house to calm down before I could sleep again. And person three, due to a long, sustained period of overwork, I have a scary 6-month gap in my memories. I remember almost nothing from that time in my life. And person four, I became so ill I was hospitalized. So before we go into how to burn out, there are a lot of personal risk factors to help you on your way to having a complete meltdown. And I've picked 3 that I think are the most relevant in this room. So number 1, if you're a social activist, you're actively supporting causes that you believe in. It might be the environment. It could also be things like diversity in the workplace, in whether it's in the office that you work in or in the characters you create. That is something that a lot of people at Sumo actively support. Number 2, if you're a parent or caregiver, you have loved ones and family that you're responsible for. That's probably the biggest responsibility that you can ever have. And number 3 on here, if you have a chronic illness or mental illness, obviously there's a massive breadth of scope in like how these things can impact you, but it may be something that you continuously have to manage. So risk factors in your career. Number 1, and this is everyone in the room, you work in a creative industry. Yep, that's everyone here. So because we have this ability to be creative in our work, there are elements of self-expression in there, and every time you're sharing your work, collaborating with other people, you may work really hard to protect yourself because you're kind of expressing yourself a little bit in what you're doing. Number 2, if you're passionate about work. So some of us are perfectionists, suspect quite a lot of people in here, and if it isn't perfect, it isn't good enough. So being passionate about work can be a bonus, but it can also lead to a total lack of boundaries between your work and personal life. Number 3, imposter syndrome. So, yep, if any of you went to Mel's talk yesterday about imposter syndrome, just realizing I didn't leave room for my text there. If you feel like an imposter, this completely erodes your self-confidence at work. So again, my colleague Melissa Young did a brilliant talk about this yesterday. If you missed out, I really recommend going back to watch it because I found it extremely helpful. Just to reiterate, you don't need to be in any of these areas to burn out. So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about myself before I go into my work life and how I burned out. So I just kind of skip forward to being a teenager. I was living with my parents in the Lake District. This is my mum and dad. Dog is called Pepper. And they're very active people, and I followed their active lifestyle. It's a big part of who I was. And I was one of the top 10 fell runners in the country for a lot of this period. So, if I had a map of my hobbies at the time, I just went running up mountains and played video games. That's pretty much all I did. So 2012, I got my dream job developing video games. And then on Valentine's Day in 2014, I was made redundant. Thank you. After just 2 years in video games, I had basically established my job as my identity, and this was absolutely devastating. Fortunately, not long after that, I lined up some interviews and I was offered a job at CCP Games. So I can see Owen in the audience, don't know if you remember, but I had my offer letter from you, I rang my parents, told them the good news, and then a few weeks later you emailed me again because I completely forgot to reply to see if I still actually wanted the job, which I did, and I'm so glad I took it. So that's a few of us at CCP, good times. Brought that denim jacket with me today, I just realised. This was a really terrific time for me. I got my redundancy pay from my previous job. So for the first time as an adult, I had some disposable income, and I went on some really cool holidays. I climbed the tallest mountains in Romania and Poland. I ran a few half marathons. I learned to ride a motorbike. That turned out to be the most expensive thing. A side note here, Snake Pass is a game that Sumo made, but it's also a super fun road in the Peak District, not far out of Sheffield. So I do recommend that if you like a good motorbike ride or drive. Even though this, chunk of time in my life was a really great time for me, I was also diagnosed with a chronic illness. It turned out I have ulcerative colitis. I actually responded really well to low-level medication, and I was part of this big clinical trial in the country about people that have Crohn's or colitis, and they're managing it well and they're in remission. So basically what that means is this is a chronic illness, you're going to have it for life, but if you're in remission, your symptoms are very well under control, and it's not hindering you in the things you're doing in your life. So all being well, in 2019, I booked my next holiday, and I was going to climb the tallest mountain in Norway. It didn't quite go to plan, and you're probably wondering how I got here. Obviously, COVID happened around this time as well, but it wasn't just that. In 2020, the way I was working and the stress I experienced escalated my illness to a critical level, and it led me into hospital. I was in there for about a month before I could be discharged, and to prove I could go home, I had to prove to doctors that I could walk up a flight of stairs. So this is how to burn out in 7 steps. I don't know why you want to know this. So this table is the Eisenhower matrix. It's introduced to this by Ben in Learning and Development. So this is a really handy way to kind of see what you need to do first. But this tip is completely deprioritize yourself. So if you've got a lot of work on, you just put it all in there. Everything's urgent and everything is important. All of my work, I just regarded it in my head as the highest priority. It didn't really matter if it was a task that said a priority on it. It all kind of looked the same to me. So I tried to think back to what things I put in this box in 2020. This is an awful list, but I was really worried about securing a promotion. And I thought the best way to do that is try and do all of the work, the best, the most of it. It's just not possible to do, but that's what I thought I was trying to do. Another one was fixing all bugs assigned to me. Again, not really possible, and I'm part of a team of level designers where we're fixing this all together. So I was trying to fix my bugs and bugs assigned to other people for some reason. The other item I put in here was playtests. We're working on Hood at this time. It's a PvP VE game, so we've got to play our game regularly. We've got to get feedback. We've got to implement it. We've got to find bugs, and we've got to fix them. And then another one I put here was leaving gifts. So as with any company, people are leaving from time to time, and they're good people, and we can't let them go empty-handed, especially during COVID and everything that was going on. So that was urgent and important too. And then so are interviews to replace all the people leaving. So all that stuff is not important. Food, outside, relationships, just forget about it, only work. So tip number 2, make an endless to-do list. Probably see where this is going. Put everything on there for today, tomorrow, next year. There's no order of importance. As I said, that's how I saw all my tasks. There's no limit. Can I fit more in my SDC presentation? Yeah, sure. So tip number 3, accept all the meetings. If you say yes to every meeting, then you can go to all of them, and you can have a calendar that looks kind of like this. Obviously, I've blurred stuff out. But actually, the image on the left, this is from 2020, and then the right was last year, so I've got even better at this one. So if you remember the Eisenhower matrix that I showed you before, if you tell yourself, food is not important or urgent, on both examples here, I had interviews that fitted right in the middle of my lunch hour, which was my only free gap. But because of the way I prioritize stuff, I always went to them. So tip number 4, multitasking. Now you're in all of the meetings, you still have a lot of work to do that's not attending meetings, so that's when you multitask. So for me, the great thing about having meetings online is I can totally have Unreal 5 open on one monitor, and I can fix these bugs while I'm in this meeting, while people are talking and asking me questions. At least I can try. I may have made some mistakes doing that fix because I'm not paying full attention to the meeting or the editor. So I might get that bug back, but I can put it on my to-do list again because it's infinite, so not a problem. Tip number 5, take all responsibility. So for those who don't know him, this is Arnold Rimmer from the TV show Red Dwarf. He works on a mining ship. And tragically, while he was on board, a drive plate failed, and nearly everyone on the ship was killed. His job is a vending machine repairman, which you may not tell from the image. So as you can tell, kind of by the way he's dressed, even if you're not familiar with the TV show, he's taken on more responsibilities than what he actually has. And embarrassingly, I kind of did the same thing at Sumo. I did not dress like this, but I had this mentality. And part of that mentality was that when people left Sumo Newcastle, I felt responsible in some way. I thought there must have been more I could have done to make working here a better place. So if anyone in this room has invented some crazy responsibilities at work that aren't anything to do with you, I'd love to hear them because I totally relate. So tip number 6, merge your work and personal life. I mentioned earlier when I was made redundant from my first games job how devastated I felt. I just thought I had failed. I was a games developer, and without that, who was I? So if you can embody your work as your identity, you can strengthen the belief that these are the most important things for you to do. So my advice, make sure you provide the same answer to these 2 questions. So tip number 7 that I think everyone will be familiar with, if we're talking about how to burn out at work, this is the top best way to do it. Doing excessive overtime is really powerful because you don't need to be attending lots of meetings or interviews. It doesn't matter what responsibilities you have, you just spend more time at work. So the information on here is from a GDC 2021 State of the Games Industry survey. And in this is like an average work week. So in this green quadrant, it's about 32% people there. Between 36 and 45 hours is 24% of respondents. And unsurprisingly, the vast majority are over here. So for me, I really kind of nailed this during COVID. Getting to work from home removed that final barrier between my home and the office. And it was just a free pass for me to do overtime that, in hindsight, was not necessary, but hey-ho. So what is burnout to you? We're going to go back to the quotes I shared with you at the beginning and talk about these people a bit. So number one, I had a simple form to fill in and realized I couldn't even write down my own name. This was actually my dad. So my dad doesn't work in game development, but seeing him go through this, go through having to be signed off from work and being really incapacitated by it for a period of his life, that should just be a cautionary tale to anyone that's overworking, regardless of what industry you're in. Person two, and I realise this is the second time Bob's been referenced today and he's not here, but panic attacks caused me to wake up in the middle of the night. I had to walk around my house to calm down before I could sleep again. So this is Bob, who's one of the executive producers at Sumo Newcastle, and I was working on this talk when he just popped over to see what I was doing. And I'm just really glad he was happy to open up to me, share this with me, and then also share it with you. For those of you who don't know Bob, for me personally, he's someone that I could never imagine panicking. He's a very level-headed person. And I just found his story so affirming to me and how this can affect anyone. So person three, due to a long, sustained period of overwork, I have a scary 6-month gap in my memories. I remember almost nothing from that time in my life. This is Lauren, one of the senior level designers. So again, we got talking about burnout while I was putting together this talk. And Lauren, so glad you shared this with me. I talked to my dad about this one after, because he also has the same thing where he's got a gap in his memory and he doesn't remember. But I really appreciate you sharing that with me and with the audience. Person number four, you probably figured out, I became so ill I was hospitalised. This was actually me. So using all the steps covered, I prioritised work above everything else. My previously well-managed disease escalated so severely that I had to go to hospital. So it's time for some actual good advice. So tip number one, go walking. If you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, go walking. If you can't walk, find some other exercise you can do. So under stress, we're programmed to fight, flight, or freeze, but it's not socially acceptable to fight your colleagues or run out the building. So take a walk instead. So on the left, it's me in hospital back in 2020. I'm recovering from emergency open surgery. This is like the pre-lunch version, so I'm going to keep it as clean as possible, but it's pretty bad. I had to have my entire colon removed due to how badly my disease escalated, so I live with an ileostomy. Happy to talk to any of you about that if you want to know more, but that's not the subject of this talk. So I'm underweight, I'm throwing up, I cannot eat. I've had several days being completely unable to walk, and I've had a day in the ICU, which is where you have one medical practitioner to completely look after you and you cannot do anything. But I am walking. And I did not appreciate how good walking was for me until I couldn't do it. So I also mentioned I had this holiday booked to go to Norway. Booked that in 2019, COVID happened, then I got ill. So I deferred it a few years. Finally, I was fit enough to do it in 2022. I climbed the tallest mountain in Norway. I did a half marathon. It was awful. Nina saw me at the end. I did buy a new motorbike as well, but it didn't seem as profound as mental health eagle, which is the point of this slide. If any of you saw me walking from the diamond to the hotel, that's why I have to do that, my stupid mental health. So tip number two, make a healthy priority. So I think I've already said this. It is absolutely okay to care about your work and to be passionate. These are good things. But you've got to keep yourself in check. You need to look after yourself in order to do that, to continue to be passionate about work and bring your best self. So make yourself the priority. If you're not really sure how to do that, ask yourself, what have you done today that is just for you? How do you replenish? It can be as simple as making sure you're eating right, getting your walkies in. That's my main thing. And then I also wanted to shout out to the Help at Hand app here. So this is part of an employee assistance program at Sumo. You get access to counselling for free, and this is just an incredible resource, and I've used it lots. So look that up on Dojo after this. So tip number 3, really basic one, but having used Outlook for 10 years and never tried to color code before, I now see how useful this is. This is actually my calendar the day before the deadline submission for SDC. I've got, I had a day full of meetings, and it's not brilliant, but it is a lot better. I can look at that, I feel way less anxious, and the colors just help me differentiate what's happening here. So just to try and pick a few examples, I've got purple there as like a sync, which is like we're just going to stand up, talk about what we did yesterday, what we're doing today. And another really important color in there, which you can't actually see represented, but I have gray for optional. So that makes it way easier for me when the day's really busy. It's really obvious to see where I can cancel something and to give myself space. So tip number 4, if anyone's watched Parks and Rec, never half-ass 2 things, whole-ass 1 thing. Every time I read this before, I just said whole-ass 1 thing, and it doesn't sound right on its own. So for this, my message is, if you're in a meeting, whether you're in a room or you're on a call and you're online, do your best to be present. If you're restless, get something to fidget with. I also meant to bring something to fidget with to illustrate that point. I've got this. When you're multitasking, you're doing a crappy job of several things. If you've got too many meetings to get your work done within the time during the day and you're feeling overwhelmed, please let your producer know, please let your line manager know. They're there to help. So talk to people. Tip number 5 was to talk about it. That's why I'm doing this talk. So interesting anecdote, while I was putting this together, Mel, one of my colleagues at Sumo Newcastle, she did a brilliant talk yesterday about imposter syndrome. And we were meeting regularly every couple of weeks just to share our progress, start practicing presenting. And then at the end of one of our practices, Mel said to me, I'm thinking of using the bank holiday Monday to get more done on my talk. And I said, that's a good idea. Even though I've just presented to her a talk where I'm saying, do not do this. So thankfully, just a few seconds later, we both realized and completely backtracked. So Mel, there you are. Really glad you didn't do this. Just urge you to keep all your bank holidays free for the rest of your life and everyone else in the room. Super important. And that's why it's important to talk about it. If someone's doing any of these things, have a conversation, then they'll be aware. Thank you, everyone. Especially thank you to Bob, Lauren, and my dad for sharing stories with me to put in my presentation, but also to Mel practicing with me, and Ben and Eric and all of the Sumo Newcastle design team. A few of the references I want to point out. I've got a really good book about burnout that I lent to someone who's burned out, so I'd love to get it back again. But this is by Emily and Amelia Nagoski, and I really recommend it. Got a link to the games industry survey in there as well. And then I also have a really good video about how to do a burnout, if anyone is interested. So there was a good quote in that video when I watched how to do a burnout. This guy's called Aaron, he works at Knox. This is no affiliation to myself. They're a brand that makes motorcycle clothing, and I like to pretend that I have custom branded stuff, and I do not. But he says, doing a burnout is super easy to do. I think pretty much anyone can have a go at it. So, yeah. That's it. Thank you. I also meant to add in here if anyone has any questions. I just didn't write it on the board, but very happy to answer questions about anything in there. Going to get your steps in doing this.
Hi there. Is this working? Can't tell. Just wondering, obviously you covered how to burn out. I was wondering if you had any advice for people who have already achieved that and trying to ease their way back into normal work.
That's a really good question. So for me personally, because I was critically ill, I was hospitalized, there was someone in HR that I talked to and also to my line manager about how I phased back into work. And they were very, they were kind of looking to me for how I wanted to come back. So that pattern that I started off with, he asked me like, if you're ready to come back, and I felt like I was because I was bored. I came in, I think maybe 2 or 3 days a week, and I sat into meetings. I didn't really contribute, but I was like, I'm just here. I'm going to absorb stuff. A piece of advice I did see on another talk that Lauren shared with me was that the most important thing is to be as slow and as cautious as possible, because if you've already burned out, I really believe your stress reservoir has probably permanently lowered. I know mine has. Like, I get really stressed out very easily. This probably didn't help, but why not? Just take it as easy as possible. You know, no one should be rushing you to come back and get up to like what you might see as like 100% speed with your work. Just take it as slow as possible and let people know if you're struggling. One of the things that's like easy to say and hard to do, but maybe the more you do it and like show your vulnerability, if you're struggling with something, the more you'll see that that's a safe thing to bring up with your colleagues. Does that help? Cool.
Hello? Is it working?
I don't think that is working. I can hear you. Oh, cool.
Okay, cool.
You can watch it back and hear the question.
Nice. I was just wondering, how do you manage not getting burnt out with doing personal work after finishing actual work?
Yeah, doing a talk at SDC is like a really good example of that, because obviously I had my chat with Mel and I was like, I'm going to try really hard delivering this talk to do it within my work time, but this is an additional thing on top of the project I'm working on. So I used one learning day. Didn't get an awful lot done in that learning day, like watched a lot of talks and stuff. So I've got to just put my hands up here and say I did put more time in to get this talk done on time. But as well as that, in my calendar, I've got 4 learning days left that I could have used. So I think I would just lean on those for stuff like this as much as possible. They're there, for that purpose. Talk to your boss, your producers, let them know, like, if there's any additional stuff you're taking on, and they can help you like accommodate that within like your normal working day. I don't know if that helps at all, but
I mean, kind of like dedicating maybe a certain amount of time after work every day to personal work, and then not going over or something like that. Or...
Personally, like, this is just like my opinion, man. I don't really like the idea of doing my personal work outside of work if it's more game development stuff. I'm quite rigid with like, I'll keep that in the office. The only thing I will probably blur it on is if there's like a game that we think is super relevant to what we're doing, I will go and play that outside of work, but I'm quite rigid with that. That's not for everyone though. I think like one discipline I would say this is really common with is with artists, because they have like a personal portfolio of work and stuff they're interested in that they're working on that's outside of the scope of their project. If it's replenishing you and you're enjoying it, then sure. But if this is taking away more time and taking time away from when you should be relaxing, refreshing, replenishing, just try and like time box it as sensibly as you can. Maybe you can do like, maybe an extra hour is absolutely fine and it works in your day and you're not overwhelmed by the end of the day. But I think keep a record of it. Like one thing I do actually do still is, even though we've got like the flexible time at work and I don't think anyone's keeping super tabs on that, I keep a tab on myself. When did I start work today and when am I clocking out and have I gone over? And I'll try and reduce it the following day and just stay flexible that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
Hello. There was a brief mention of balance between personal life and work life. That's something for me, like, without shadow of doubt, is the hardest thing. I'm full-time remote, have 2 small children as well, so finding that balance is bloody difficult. So, like, outside of some of maybe the typical suggestions, I was just wondering if there's anything sort of life hacky that you would suggest to sort of better find that balance. Because even just finishing at 4 p.m, like, I'll always start consistently at 8 o'clock, very rarely finish at 4:00.
Yeah.
It's always over by an hour or so, like every day. So like finding that balance is really hard.
There is one little tip that I might be wrong with who suggested it to me. It might have been Ben in Learning and Development, because like he came and sat in on me and Mel practicing our talks, and that was probably later in the afternoon. Like Ben got in touch with us because he had personal stuff to tend to at home, and when we just rescheduled. So it was like being honest with your colleagues about like a family thing has come up, and I feel like that's why I really like the colleagues I work with, because they're respectful of additional things that do come up. But one simple thing is like, if you're going over your time and you're like acutely aware of that and you should have stopped, but maybe you do feel you have to get this thing done, is appearing offline so people aren't going to bother you. You can just focus on like getting this one last thing done. Is a simple thing, but it's effective, because for me, if I have stayed a little bit later trying to get this done or something else on the project, seeing my team all offline gives me like good peace of mind, because I'm like, well, they're not doing that. But now as I'm saying it, I'm like, is everyone secretly offline and still doing work? So I don't know. Hopefully not. Maybe. I did say this would be full of bad advice.
No, that's good. Great
Does
talk.
that help?
That's really good. Really good.
Hi, Emily. Thank you for sharing.
Dan.
I just wanted to ask, as a senior member who works with others, how conscious are you about sort of checking in with your other team members to see how full their meters are?
Yeah.
And do you find that that's ever sort of impacted your own? Like you would take responsibilities from others who are approaching those symptoms of burnout in order to kind of shield them from it?
Yep. That's a really good question. So I can't even remember how long ago it was, but like a few months ago, I got my promotion to lead. So I inherited a lot of responsibility. And, you know, going on the leadership training course helped me a little bit to prepare for that. But I always knew personally that my priority is with that team, and are they okay? Maybe to an extreme of like, I just want to check in on with them all the time, and them to know that the door is open and that I would always make myself available to them. But then you do have to be cognizant of like your, you know, the limits of your day and your boundaries and the work that you've got to get done. The way I try and manage that is that, you know, I'm not the person that's building the levels anymore. It's that level design team. And if they're happy and things are running okay, then that's a big win. So I try and make that my priority. I don't have like, I'm still learning how to do that. And I'm still coming to terms with like my example was having Unreal 5 open. Don't have Unreal 5 open that much anymore. I'm just in a lot of meetings. But I use like the color coding in Outlook. I keep like catch-ups with my team as like an important thing that I won't change unless like I absolutely have to, or like they're unavailable or I am definitely unavailable. As weird as it may sound, I felt like the minimum I can do, but also the most important thing is make that time for them. And if they're all running okay, that's a big enough win that like maybe I've been a bit later with something else. Definitely done that a few times since starting it. So, yeah, cheers. Oh, there's one at the front. Sorry, farthest away.
Thank you. Similarly to the question there, it's more from a management lead production point of view. And thank you for this talk and sharing your experience on burnout. When we see it from a lead perspective, how would you have appreciated somebody coming to you if they saw you kind of getting to that stage? Massively,
and like, I wouldn't want to do this job if I didn't know that, felt like I know that level design team pretty well. And, you know, rightly or wrongly, I think we have a brilliant two-way street where they check in on me as well. And like, number of times that like looking for her now, but Lucy's checked in on me to say, have you gone home? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. And go and do that. And like, yeah, Lucy, another one I wanted to put in this talk was that book about stoicism. If I had more time, I would have totally put that in there because it's recentering yourself to the things that you can control, like what you're responsible for. If you're responsible for that team, check they're okay, and give yourself the same grace. That's from Mel's talk. Give yourself the grace that you give other people. Treat them how you want to be treated. I think we have a really nice two-way street where they do check in on me as well, and like lead has been really stressful. So this has been a really good test to try and do that and this, and try not to do any of the bad stuff, but also put my hands up when I am doing it, like myself and Mel discovered. Yeah, I rambled then. I don't know if I
No, it's fine.
that.
It's just I'm thinking like if I ever come across the team, like I'm nagging them because I see them working over lunch and they just kind of want to finish something, or they're staying a bit late, and I'm like, go home or something. And like how would you have maybe best taken someone seeing you in that stage, because you are in that stage of deprioritizing yourself?
Yeah, I think the really
nagging.
tough thing with that was when it was COVID, no one could see. So while I was putting this together, I was talking to one of the artists, and they were like, when they were working from home, they were like, I've got myself in this weird pattern where like I'd rebuild the lighting on the level, then I'd go and make my dinner, then I'd come back and check it had built, and it hadn't, so then I would go and do it again. But there's no one in that office environment that can see that they're staying late. You've just got that, are they online or offline? So I do try and like, if I see someone is still online, just give them a little nudge. You cannot physically pull them away from their desk, but you can remind them, and they can remind you as well. Like another little thing I do try and do is when I'm signing off at the end of the day, I message people that are online and say, I'm going home now. And hopefully that's a message that like, please go home and stop working without me telling you what to do. Yeah, hope that helps. Cool.
Thanks, Emily. That was great, and it was really nice to see lots of nodding heads, because I think I'm really guilty of all of this, and it's nice to know that it's not just
same.
me. So, I have a question. If you have any advice on kind of managing other people's expectations, I know that I'm really bad at saying no. So if someone says, "Oh, could you do this?" or "Could you hop in a meeting?" I just wondered if you had any advice on kind of going, no.
We were talking about that like before coming into this talk. I did have a slide in there that was all about like the habit of saying yes to everything, and it's something that I'm still working on, because my default response to a question is like yeah, and then I'll just deal with the consequences later. So it was like yeah, I'll do an SDC talk. I didn't have a lot of time to do it. It's like there's no like nice hacky way to do it, but it is saying no. Like an example I had in there was like quite often now we'll get interview requests that happen at lunchtime. I talked to a few more people about that since showing them a bit of the talk, because they made a good point that people coming for interview now, because they can be working remote, lunchtime might be that best window for them. So then it becomes a thing that you've got to do. It's to like, do not be afraid of the decline button, and edit the decline before saying, and like, I'm sorry, I do need my lunch break. For me, like last one I cancelled at lunchtime, I was like, I need to go to the pharmacy. No one can stop me. I got to go. But also, like, I don't know, you don't need to be 100% transparent about the thing that you're doing. You can also book yourself in a meeting, and then the person making those requests can see that you're busy. Like, I do not envy recruiters trying to organize interviews, because how on earth do you grab all these people that are in all these meetings? I do not know. But you've got to advocate for yourself. If you need that time, you've got to like be brave, hit decline, edit it before sending, put a little smiley face in is like what I do. Like, sorry, I cannot do that. And yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. I think that's it. Cool. Thanks, everybody.